I'll talk to them when they get here.
I have
Carol
all
goes
Oh,
first.
yeah, and so at some point we may wanna send it out.
Last name
I
is
heard that from
FLA.
Shannon.
You know, like the.
Yeah, FLADUNG.
And managing partner at Hennis Communications.
Respect, not a time. No.
Making sure.
Yeah, I don't know, she's having a good time. I was embarrassed.
Embarrassing.
She was not feeling any pain.
Oh, I mean, this is. You gave him a column.
Hey, how are you? Tom Flatt, Director of Hennis Communications.
Oh, are you? So you sit away from each other?
Brandon.
We sit near each other now. How are you?
I'm very
You think? Mike's a nice guy.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you know, I just don't, I'd like to know, and say, hey,
We should, you know.
me to stand over?
Phone is turned off.
Mike, can you see me over here? Do you want me to stand over there? Okay.
No,
We're good now. We're good now.
I know, but I want to move